Hello there and welcome to Unqualified Opinions. I'm Marco Yerkovich, and today I'm joined by Jared DeHaan, Tim Seipel, Will Byerman, and Paul Hires as we do our weekly pick'ems for the week of November 5th through November 11th. Before we get into things, we've got everybody's favorite mini segment, Just the Numbers with Paul Hires.
All right, so that tie at the bottom of the standings that I talked about last week, we're right back where we started. Tim at the bottom after a 2-3 record last week.
Let's go.
So Tim at the bottom at 23-22, Marco in fifth at 24-21, and Will in fourth now at 25-20, going 4-1 last week.
Moving up, Paul. We're moving up.
So good week for Will there. Jared up to third at 28-17.
Look at that NFL number. So much better than last year. And I haven't watched a single game.
12-9 in the NFL. And I'm up to 29-16 overall. 4-1 last week. And 15-6 in the NFL. But nobody is better than Joseph Rena at 17-4 in the NFL. 31-14 overall. Going 3-2 last week. And overall, we are 160-110 at 59%. 19-11 last week. Texas sweeping Oklahoma State there in overtime. That was a good game, but still all of us had Oklahoma State. And let's talk about these only picks here. Tim picking the 49ers, Jared picking the Bears. So now we are down to 2-12 in one-pick teams this season, 0-9 in the NFL. That's 14% overall and 0% in the NFL. Jared at 1-3, Tim at 1-3, and Marco at 0-4 when they pick alone. So keep that in mind.
Not our best record. I said it last week. I said it about the Penn State game, but I think a lot of people had more confidence in Ohio State beating Penn State than they did Oklahoma State beating Texas. So just watch out for those clean sweeps. So we're going to get into the pick'ems, but before we do, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your own unqualified opinions in the comment section down below. So with that, the first pick is a college football game, the Nebraska Cornhuskers at the Northwestern Wildcats, Saturday at 11 a.m. on BTN. Jared, what's your pick in that one?
I'm going to have to go with the Road Warriors and the Huskers. Scott Frost is going to find an interesting way of incorporating both Martinez and McCaffrey in the system. And I think somehow the Huskers are going to pull it off and get a last-second touchdown to win the game.
Before we move on, I did forget to mention Joseph's pick. He's going to be a contrarian and go with the Northwestern Wildcats in this one. So let's get right back to it. Tim, what's your pick?
Yeah, so, obviously, Huskers only have the Ohio State game to really go off of, while Northwestern has come in with two wins, beating Iowa by 1 last week. So this will definitely be an interesting game. I think it's going to be close, but I'm really liking what I saw out of the Huskers. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased when it comes to the Skurs, but it'll be interesting to see how Scott Frost uses Adrian Martinez and Luke McCaffrey to kind of mess with the schemes that Northwestern has to run on the defensive end. And I think that will cause a lot of issues. Obviously, with Isaiah Bowser for Northwestern, I think as long as the Huskers are able to contain him and force Ramsey to throw the ball, I think it's going to be a Skurs by 90 win.
I mean, conventional wisdom is obviously telling me to vote with Joseph Rena because he's by far been the best in this competition. And a large part of me is telling me to do that, but I can't get myself to pick against the Skurs right now, so go Nebraska.
Yeah, good wins for Northwestern in both of their first two games. I think that was a really statement win over Maryland. We thought Maryland wasn't going to be that great this year, but then they come out and beat Minnesota the next week. So right now, the Big Ten has just kind of been thrown for a loop. We're still trying to figure out how good these teams are. Is Iowa as good as they were last year, or are they not that great? Is Northwestern the Big Ten West contender? I think this is a huge matchup in the Big Ten West with all the cancellations that Wisconsin has had. But I'm going to have to go with Nebraska a little bit for bias. But I think this matchup we've known has gone both ways. And I think the road team usually takes it in these games.
Many Big Ten West teams, including Illinois, Minnesota, and Iowa, are already 0-2. and the fact that with one more cancellation, being the game against Michigan, Wisconsin loses the right to participate in the Big Ten championship game, you're really looking at a handful of teams, and less than that even, that can compete for the Big Ten West crown. Nebraska and Northwestern are firmly in that conversation talent-wise, so this honestly could end up being an early season de facto Western Division championship game. So it's actually far more important than maybe Husker fans or even Wildcat fans are willing to give it credit for. I think Nebraska did not obviously finish the game well against Ohio State, but we saw a lot of spurts early where they looked quite competitive with Ohio State, far more than Penn State did for the majority of their game. And Northwestern had a handful of give me turnovers against Maryland. Tua's younger brother was just getting situated. And then the game against Iowa was just a slugfest, a low-scoring slugfest, so they didn't play their best. So I'll have to go with Nebraska, but again, that's begrudgingly. I don't have a lot of confidence in that pick. So let's move into our next college football pick. It's number 8 Florida Gators against the number 5 Georgia Bulldogs, Saturday at 2:30 p.m. on CBS. Joseph is going with Florida. Jared, who's your pick in that one?
So I really want to pick Florida in this game. I mean, Florida has had a pretty good year, 18 touchdowns to turnover ratio. But for some reason, I'm going to go with Georgia. I think their running game, just get after it in this game. I think their defense will come up. And I think Florida, I just don't have enough faith in their defense to pull through with this. I think Georgia gets it done by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I'm going to have to kind of go off on what Jared said. I mean, if you look at the previous opponents that each team has faced, I mean, they're both have one loss, and that loss is to a really good team. I mean, for Georgia, they lost to Alabama, and for the Gators, they lost to Texas A&M, and Texas A&M is currently 7th ranked in the nation. So both teams have really good losses and some really good wins. But when I look at Georgia, I mean, they beat Tennessee, they beat Auburn, and those are their 2 ranked wins, while still they have not beaten a team that is ranked. So I'm a little bit pessimistic against Florida. Obviously, Trask's numbers looks great, but unless they face a team, or until they face a ranked team, which they will this Saturday, I'm going to have to go with the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, ultimately, I think it's going to come down to Cal Pitts and Cal Trask for Florida. I think they're 2 of the best offensive players in college football. I think Trask is having a very, very underrated season. And I think Pitts, I mean, especially for a tight end, there's an unbelievable level of respect and hype for him around the league. I think he's really just one of the best players on offense. And I really have my doubts about Stetson Bennett at quarterback and just Georgia's offense in general. So I think Florida's going to sneak away with this one.
I think Tim really hit it on the head when he said you got to look at those 2 losses, one for each team. And Alabama, as we know, is a top team in the country. They're probably going to be up for another college football playoff again this year. And so a 41-24 loss doesn't look too bad in the grand realm of things. I think Texas A&M is a quality loss as well. But I think Georgia's just had those more quality opponents. They beat Auburn back the stretch. We picked that game. They won 27-6. And I think Florida just has a little bit more to prove. Their defense hasn't been all that great, giving up 29.3 points per game so far this season. I think Georgia's rushing attack is going to get the job done, and I got to go with the Bulldogs in this one.
So this is probably one of the most important matchups in college football regarding playoff possibilities. Now, do I think either of these teams will make the college football playoff winner or loser of this matchup? No, I don't think so, because they still have to go through the buzzsaw that is Alabama from the West. That being said, this matchup has enormous implications for the SEC East. Consider a de facto championship game for that division. That being said, like Paul said, looking at the resumes, Florida, their loss to Texas A&M continues to look better and better each week, while Georgia's loss against Alabama is a strange one. They were competitive, if not better, in the first half, and then Alabama slowly dismantled them in the second half and pulled away. The one reason you wouldn't pick Georgia would have to be Stetson Bennett. The quarterback has not been a strong suit for Georgia. However, I think their league-leading and top national defense will have something to say about that. Florida, has a good, strong offense. Nothing compared to what this Georgia defense is able to do, as well as Georgia's rushing attack being top 3 in the SEC, should overpower the Florida defense. So I'll have to go with Georgia in this one. So let's move into our final college football pick'em. That's going to be a very interesting one now due to a COVID test for Trevor Lawrence, as number 1 Clemson Tigers will travel to South Bend to face the 4th-ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish on Saturday at 6:30 on NBC, again without their Heisman Trophy frontrunner and quarterback Trevor Lawrence. Joseph going with Clemson. Jared, who's your pick in this one?
This is another one. I really want to go with the home team of Notre Dame. I mean, but even Clemson without Trevor Lawrence, they got it done last week. It wasn't pretty against Boston College, but they pulled through. And I think through that, I think they're going to get it done. I mean, they have a good enough defense, actually a really good defense, and their offense is firepower even without Lawrence. So I think Etienne, if he can get at it and pick up a lot of yards, I think they can get it done.
Etienne?
I'm not good at pronouncing names. I'm sorry.
So, when I look at this matchup, I look at the defensive side. Obviously, when you have a backup in for Clemson, that's hard. But I mean, some backups are better than a lot of starters across the board in college. So obviously, they're able to pull out a win. And this defense is great. I mean, less than 100 yards rushing allowed per game. That is phenomenal for Clemson. And Ian Book has not looked great at all. So as long as you are able to control Williams, the running back for Notre Dame, he's averaging about 6 yards per carry, and he has 7 touchdowns, which is right up there with Etienne. Did I get that right? All right,
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yep, you did.
So he's right up there with them. But I think this Clemson defense is able to smother the run game and force Ian Book to throw, which has been a negative for him. So I'm going to have to go with Clemson.
I'm going to go with something that Tim and Jared have not wanted to do yet, and that's I'm going to go and try to pronounce DJ Uiagalelei is the new starting quarterback for Clemson with Trevor Lawrence out this COVID test, and I think he looked phenomenal in his first action for Clemson, which is, to be fair, what you'd expect. I know earlier me and Paul were talking about how last year people were freaking out about how they didn't know if Mac Jones would be a good tour replacement. Paul pointed out he's an elite quarterback prospect who's had time to relax within the system, within an elite system. DJ is the same way. He may be young, he may be a backup, but he's still better than pretty much. You could honestly argue he's probably still among the top 10% of quarterbacks in college football, being a 5-star, number 1 overall quarterback at a school like Clemson. I think he's just getting started, and I really think he can carry this Clemson Tigers program. On the quarterback side for Notre Dame, Ian Book, he's a really good player. He's getting close to breaking some Notre Dame records. He's up there. But I saw an ESPN article that just said he's probably the prototype for fine quarterback play. And by fine, I just mean fine, like, He's not going to lose you games, but I don't think he has the ability to put up the big stats, the big numbers, and the big plays that you're going to need to beat a team like Clemson. So for that reason, I think Clemson's going to take this one pretty easily.
First thing I'd like to say is that, it really makes it better that Notre Dame is playing in the ACC. I think in the years past, it's been so hard to judge Notre Dame's, talent and ability on the field, when half of their games are not even, Power 5 teams. So the fact that they're playing all ACC schedule this season really makes it easier to compare it against other ACC teams. Now, that being said, they beat Georgia Tech last week 31-13. Let's not forget Clemson beat them 73-7. Okay? And another thing I'd like to point out is, Trevor Lawrence is a good player, but he's not the whole team. This whole team, went to the national championship last year. This whole team beat Boston College last week without him, 34-28. And Boston College has played better than we've seen in a lot of years past. This Clemson offense is putting up 508 total yards per game. That is unbelievable. I think Clemson is the better team even without Trevor Lawrence, and I got to go with Clemson.
Yeah, I agree that this matchup will probably be much more closely contested without Trevor Lawrence. But you guys mentioned it, it's a Mac Jones situation. The backup is also a 5-star recruit, just a year younger than the starter. I mean, that's not to say that they're going to play as well, but these aren't just nobodies that they've pulled out of the student section to walk on the field and play for them on Saturday. So with that, and on top of Paul's point of saying he's not the whole team. I mean, this team is filled with 5 stars that have been to multiple national championship games, won a national championship or 2. This team is experienced. This coaching staff knows what they're doing. And honestly, Notre Dame hasn't exactly played the best. They beat Louisville by only 5 points, and they just beat up on a Pittsburgh team who didn't even have their starting quarterback. So I'm not entirely sure how strong Notre Dame is to start with. So with those reasons, I'll go with Clemson. The pretty easy victory. It will surprise some people, but for the people like us that know what's going on, I think it'll be pretty obvious that Clemson's going to win pretty handily. But it is a clean sweep, so I could be eating my words. Notre Dame could surprise us all. But with that, that is a Clemson clean sweep, so don't listen to what I'm saying. Go put your money on Notre Dame. So now let's move into our NFL games. We've got the Seattle Seahawks at the Buffalo Bills, Sunday at noon on Fox. Joseph going with the Seahawks. Jared, who's your pick in that one?
I mean, if we all remember from last year, I never had anything to say about NFL games, and I did really bad. This year I'm doing better, and I have not paid attention at all. From what I've seen, Bills seem to be pretty good this year. Josh Allen's been doing pretty good. I'm going to go with the Bills.
Well, that was faster than expected. So, when you look at this Seahawks team, the crux of all of their issues has to come from the defensive end. It does come from the defensive end. I mean, they're allowing upwards of 366 pass yards per game, which is absolutely, it is awful. It is, I can't even put it to words. The run game is looking a lot better, their defense against the run, but, the Seahawks struggle on the defensive end. The Bills really are able to do a good job on the defensive end. So you kind of have different teams on that side. But the Seahawks are more efficient on the offensive side. I mean, when you look at this last game, Bills won by 3 against the Patriots that honestly did not look good. I'm sorry, but they really did not look good, and the Bills barely beat them by 3. Now, with the Seahawks, they won by 10 against San Francisco for a good kind of comeback win. Comeback as in coming back from the Arizona loss in overtime. So I think because of this, I'm going to have to go with the Seahawks. I think the offense is able to get it done more than the Bills' offense is able to do.
It's like you said, Tim, it really is going to come down to Seattle's defense. And until a couple weeks ago, I would have been very confident that Buffalo had the firepower to keep this going. But we just haven't. We've seen a definite dip in their production over the last couple weeks, including last week where they beat the Patriots. And that was mostly because of the Patriots doing as opposed to theirs. Their offense has not been nearly as explosive. And I think it's not a condemnation of Josh Allen exactly because he's not putting up the monster stats he was earlier, but he's also still being an efficient top-level quarterback. But, I mean, if you look at the last couple scores, 17 points against KC, 16 points against Tennessee, only 18 against the Jets. They're really going to need to step up on offense if we want to beat Seattle. I just don't see that happening. So for that reason, I'm going to take the Seahawks.
Yeah, I think you guys really hit it on the head when you said, the first 4 games, we didn't really see them struggle a whole lot. The last 4 games we have, the 2 losses to Tennessee and Kansas City, obviously, and then 18-10 against the Jets. I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. And we talked about it, the Patriots win, was a good win for the division for the Bills, but let's be honest, Marco, the Patriots are not what they were, even last year, or just in previous years. I think the Bills, they're still going to be a playoff team. They're still going to make it. I just don't see them doing too much. And I think the Seahawks are just consistent enough to get the job done on the road. So I'm going to go with Seattle.
Yeah, so the Bills are 6-2, but they are not the team in the previous 4 weeks that they were in the first 4 weeks of the season, barely getting across the finish line against average teams and nearly losing against pretty bad teams. Not a great recipe when you're facing one of the top 5 offenses in the NFL. Now, does Seattle have a defense? The answer is still no. People can blame their pass coverage, but it's hard to cover a guy for 5, 6, 7 seconds. If only Seattle would have had a guy last season that they could have re-signed to really bolster their run defense. I think that would have been a tremendous idea.
I mean, Jadeveon Clowney has 0 sacks in 8 games this season. So, I mean, as much as you'd want him on that team, I don't know how much of an impact he'd make.
I mean, sacks are not the only way to measure a guy's impact on the defensive line. It's about the double teams he takes up, the pressure he creates, all that sort of thing. But honestly, in my opinion, I think this Seattle team has a very dynamic offense, and it mostly lies at the feet of Russell Wilson. I mean, he has some dynamic receivers, but it really seems game to game who shows up as the top receiver. So I'll have to go with Seattle in this one, mostly because, again, Russell Wilson, along with Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, are the clear frontrunners for the MVP in the NFL. So our final pick'em of the day, we've got a great matchup. The New Orleans Saints at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Sunday at 7:15 on NBC, with quarterbacks of a combined age of 84, yet again setting an NFL record that usurps the one that the two set earlier in the year when they matched up in Week 1 when the Saints won that game. So Joseph, he'll go with the Saints in this one. Jared, who's your pick?
I'm going to go against Joseph on this one. Reasoning, Tampa Bay's 3-0 at home. Saints 2-1 on the road. Tampa Bay has Tom Brady, who we know is one of the greatest of all time. Even though Drew Brees is really good, Tom Brady's had a pretty exceptional year for being 43 years old. So in that case, I'm going to go with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
There's one player I'd love to mention that is really rising to the occasion, and that is Ronald Jones II. He had to play behind Peyton Barber for a while, which is honestly an awful move that he hasn't been put in the lineup, or he wasn't put in the lineup sooner. But he's been absolutely carrying the ball phenomenally. I mean, he's averaging about 5 yards per carry. He has 4 touchdowns on the season. He's looking really good. Alvin Kamara on the other side is also looking good. And honestly, we don't know much about Michael Thomas. I don't know whether or not he's going to be playing. I think Michael Thomas has become more and more of a liability because he hasn't been playing, which is obviously taken away a lot of money from the Saints. So when I look at these teams, both teams have really struggled against teams that they should have beaten by more. I mean, you got the Saints winning by 3 against Chicago and Carolina, and even the Chargers. I mean, they're really winning the close games, and they're finishing. That's good. And, even the Bucs winning by 2 against the Giants. I don't know. They both played the Chicago Bears. The Bucs lost by 1. The Saints won by 3. That's a common opponent that you have, but I think I'm going to go with the Bucs. I think this is going to be a hot team. Obviously, Gronk has become more and more involved. Mike Evans is 6 for 6 for touchdowns when targeted in the end zone. He's an absolute beast down there. And as long as they're able to control Alvin Kamara as much as possible, I think the Bucs are able to take it.
First, I'd like to clarify with you, Tim. Ronald Jones, he has had a really good season, but the reason he was behind Peyton Barber is because his first 2 seasons in the league, he was plagued both by fumbling problems and also the fact that he was almost incapable of consistently catching short passes, and that issue really kind of helped. Drew Brees really has not looked the same way he has in the past. He's been slower, he's been older, he's not completing as many big throws. Me and Paul talked all weekend about how they were playing the Bears, because I could not think of 2 more boring teams to watch on offense, which is a shame because of how many dynamic players the Saints have on that side of the ball. I just think the Buccaneers are they're an ascending team. Saints are a descending team. We haven't seen the best from the Buccaneers, and I think the Saints are just going to be looking to hang in there for the rest of the season. So I'm going to take the Buccaneers here.
So Tim mentioned the Bears' common opponent, and another common opponent that I can't believe he forgot to mention was the Packers. The Saints lost by 7, and the Buccaneers won by 4 touchdowns. I think that's a huge, huge game you have to look at, as the Tampa Bay really shut down that Packers offense. They've had a couple close calls here with the Bears and the Giants, but I think the Buccaneers defense is the huge key in this one. 70 rush yards on average given up by that front 7 for the Buccaneers. I think that's going to play a huge role in shutting down the Saints' run game, making them more of a one-dimensional option. I think Drew Brees can make it a one-dimensional offense and make it work that way. But at the end of the day, I think the Buccaneers are going to be too much, and I'm going to have to go with Tampa Bay on this one.
So I know we keep talking about these common matchups, but I can't believe we're not talking about the fact that these teams already played. The Saints already beat the Buccaneers. So this lends me to a point that teams evolve throughout a season. They get better, they get worse, they improve on certain things, they get worse on certain things. And I think Tampa Bay was adapting a new offensive system with Tom Brady and an entirely new culture in many respects. And I think it's taken time. And yes, they've had some setbacks. The loss against the Bears, barely beating the Giants. But overall, I think the Buccaneers have been one of the most consistent teams in the NFL in the past 5 to 6 weeks. And I think they've really evolved. Meanwhile, again, still without Michael Thomas, the Saints have continued to regress. They barely beat the Chargers. They continue to struggle with almost every single opponent they face. So that being said, I think I'll have to go with Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. You mentioned that rush defense. It's the best in the league by a long shot, only allowing 70 yards per game. And honestly, Levante David and Devin White have to probably be considered the best linebacking duo in the NFL. So all that being said, I'll go with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I will point out one thing before we let you go, that if everything goes Joseph's way, he's contradicted a couple potential clean sweeps. He already has a really big lead on you, Paul, and on the rest of us. If he goes 5-0, he's going to extend that lead by a crazy margin. But yeah, the race is getting tight, especially at the bottom. Will, Tim, and I all separated by just 2 games, so it's getting tight here in the later goings of this season. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, for watching and listening. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your own unqualified opinions in the comment section down below. For Marco Yerkovich, Paul Hires, Tim Seipel, Jared DeHaan, and Will Byerman, thank you so much, and we'll see you guys next time.